NBA All-Star project, we are going to turn our data sets for our points, our assists, and our rebounds into scatter plots. This is going to give us a visual representation of how our players are doing from game 1 to game 20. Before we start, I need you to write down a couple of things. So you'll see the games are listed in column A for our points, and they don't start, game 1 doesn't start until row 4. And if you scroll down, when you scroll down, it actually doesn't, it goes through row 23. So I need you to write down A4 and A23. And then for our assists, we see that it starts in the same rows for 4 through 23, but it is in column E. So we need to remember E is with our assists and I is for our rebounds. That's going to be really important when developing our scatter plots. So to start, we first start by taking our, we're going to drag and we are going to highlight over our 3 players' names in only our point section because we're going to make 3 different scatter plots, one for points, one for the assists, and one for rebounds, because we're comparing only the points in our scatter plots, only the assists, and only the rebounds for those 3 players. So once I highlight, you'll notice that I highlighted games 1 through 20, including their names. The only thing in blue that wasn't highlighted was the word points. So now I'm going to hit Insert, and I'm going to go to Chart. And up's going to pop a chart, and it's actually going to be a line graph. We don't want a line graph, we want a scatter plot. And so we're going to go over to Chart Type. We're going to click on that, and we're going to go all the way down to Scatter. This now turns all of our games. We can actually see each game and how they did throughout those 20. So you can see that Steph Curry was out for 2 games, scored 0 points. And so that should also be listed in my data sets. So this is all of my data individually on a graph. And so now you'll see that there's no numbers for my x-axis, so I don't even know what's happening on it. So I need to add an x-axis, and this is where those things that I had you write down are really important. So for points, our game numbers were listed in column A, and they started in row 4, and then we're going to do a colon, and they go through A23. That's where our last game was listed. So those are the cells that those games are data is listed in. So now I'm going to hit OK. And so now I can see the bottom, the x-axis has anywhere from 0 to my 20 games. So that's important to have on there when actually making those comparisons and reading a scatter plot. So now I need to add in some titles. So I'm going to go to Chart and Axis Titles. I'm going to click on that. And I'm first going to click on my chart title. In this particular data set, this was our points. So I'm going to label this my point comparison because we are comparing the points for my 3 players. And so it changed it for me on the graph. Now I'm going to go to my horizontal axis. This is my x-axis that I just fixed and added on to the scatter plot. And this would be my, my gains. Then I'm going to click on horizontal axis, and then it's going to pop up. I'm going to click on vertical. So now I need to label my y-axis, and this is what's happening over here. And these are how many points were scored. And so I'm going to say points scored. So I'm almost done with my scatter plot. I just need to add in a couple of things. And so I'm going to click on chart style again, and it's going to close the titles that I was originally adding. And now I'm going to click on series. And so when I click on the series, I'm going to scroll down to trend lines. And all I have to do is click the check mark. And once I click on that, you'll notice that it added lines in my scatter plot. A couple of things are really important about this. You should have your 3 players listed above, and it gave those players a specific color. So you should see 3 colors on your graph. You also, now that we hit trend lines, we should see 3 trend lines on our graph. You'll notice that 2 of mine kind of overlap, but there's still those 3 individual lines. And so these lines are really important because with a scatter plot, we really can't see how the player is doing over time. And so these trend lines give us an idea of if they were increasing from their points scored at the beginning of the season to now, or were they decreasing? So for LeBron, you'll see LeBron scored more points at the beginning of the season than he has been in his 20th game, while my other player is actually increasing over time, which makes sense because he was sitting out for 3 games. He was hurt. And so that tells me that since he's been back, he's been scoring more points. So after I've added my titles and my trend lines, I'm going to click on my graph and I'm going to shrink it down. And now I'm going to place this over, maybe. I'm going to drag this over to where it says place your graphs below here. So now I'm going to do the same thing for my assists. I'm going to highlight my 3 players. Again, I'm highlighting everything that's in that reddish color column or section without highlighting the word assists. We do not want to highlight that word. So now I'm going to hit Insert, Chart. It popped up the wrong chart again, so I'm going to go and click to go down to Scatter. I'm going to add my x-axis, and we noticed, or we had wrote down that these games for my assists are in column E, so I have E4, colon E23. I hit OK. I now need to add in my titles, so I'm going to go to Chart Titles after I click on Customize. I'm going to go to Chart Title. It thinks it knew what it was talking about, but it doesn't, so we're going to go Assists Comparison. I'm going to click it back on chart title and I'm going to go down to horizontal axis title. And this again was just my games. That's my x-axis. And then for my vertical, this is now not points scored, so don't retype that one in. This is now the number of assists. And so this is going to tell us that the number of assists per game when you look at this chart. Then I need to go down to series, and I'm going to go click on that trend line. And I can see that LeBron is decreasing with the number of assists that he's had over the past 20 games, while my other 2 players are passing the ball more. So now I'm going to click that X. I'm going to shrink down my graph, and I'm going to move that under my points comparison. And I'm going to make my last one. So I'm going to highlight my 3 players again. I'm going to go all the way down to their 20th game. So I'm highlighting all my orange, except for the word rebounds. I'm going to hit Insert, maybe, Charts. I need to go back and click on my chart type because it's wrong. I'm going to click Scatter. I then need to add an axis. And we said that this one goes through E. No, it doesn't. It goes through I, 4. And we're going to do the colon, I, 23. I hit OK. So it goes through those 20. It labels it 20. And now I just need to add my titles. So let's go to Titles. We are going to click on Chart Title. Again, it thought it knew what it was talking about, but it doesn't. So we are going to name this Rebound Comparison because we are comparing the rebounds of 3 players. I'm going to hit Chart Title. I'm going to go to Horizontal Axis. This again is just my games. Vertical Axis. This would be the number of rebounds. And then I'm going to go down to Series. And I'm going to click on my trend lines, and I can see that 2 of my players are decreasing with their number of rebounds throughout the season while the other one is increasing, which makes sense because at the beginning of the season that player was actually sitting out. He was hurt. So I'm going to click that X. I'm then going to shrink down my graph and drag it on over to where it said to place my graphs below. And this way I can visually see my 3 players. I can compare who's doing better. I can look at, is my player, is he decreasing in points throughout the season, and I need to figure out why. I need to look at the number of rebounds that they're having because I want to know if they can get the ball back. And for assists, I want to know if they're passing the ball. And you want to pick the player that is doing better throughout the season. Now, it doesn't mean that all the players are going to be increasing over time, but it does mean that you need to take a look at this and see, well, what player would make the most sense for my team.